The FDA has issued a new warning about some of the popular diabetes drugs being used for weight loss.
A viral trend could be putting people with diabetes at risk.
To treat diabetes has now become popular on social media platforms like TikTok for weight loss.
If it's not used correctly, it can lead to severe problems.
Ozempic.
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 This is not a miracle instant gratification medicine to be taken lightly.
The prevalence of diabetes has substantially increased and continues to increase all across the world. Only 50 years ago, 108 million cases were present, compared to around 420 million cases now. The condition is by no means curable, but there is treatment available that can keep patients alive and relatively healthy. But what if these treatments had side effects that social media seems to be desperate for, that influencers and celebrities are seeking in abundance? It turns out that this actually is what has happened. In fact, a relatively new treatment for type 2 diabetes has seen its consumption rise exponentially for this reason alone. Whilst this is having positive side effects for the people without diabetes taking it, the negative consequences may potentially be just on the horizon. And what makes it even worse is that our supplies of this new medication are running dangerously thin for those actually living with the condition, leading some to, unfortunately, incredible deaths or even worse. For this, as I'm sure you've heard of, is Ozempic, and disaster might be just around the corner. So this is Ozempic. It was developed in 2012 by Novo Nordisk from the compound semaglutide. The team behind the research believed it to be a fitting drug for diabetic therapy, hypothesized to perform far better and being longer lasting than the current drug therapy consisting of liraglutide. Ozempic entered clinical trials in 2015 and it proved the hypothesis correct. The drug was approved for pharmaceutical use in 2017, which saw the US officially prescribe it for the treatment of type 2 diabetes, and the UK was soon to follow in 2019. Instead of constant administrations daily like before with type 2 diabetes, Ozempic and other brand names allowed the greater freedom of doing it once weekly. Yet, a lot of the research has actually found Ozempic to have another significant property. It can significantly help someone lose weight. Some doctors trialled prescribing it to patients with BMIs over that of 30, and the results seem to come back generally positive. This has led to increasing numbers of people buying it over the counter or without their insurance in the US. You see, not only is diabetes on the rise, but so are eating disorders. Body dysmorphia, bulimia and anorexia nervosa are too seeing spikes in their reported cases. And it may not be causation, but there does seem to be somewhat of a link between the dominance of social media and this rise. So it's really no surprise that Ozempic is now seeing global shortages. But what exactly is it doing to the body? Is it even safe to take without diabetes? Are people simply putting themselves at risks for likes on social media? You see, the compound Ozempic is derived from, semaglutide, has a longer half-life than previous drugs. This means it remains in the body for considerably longer, but what is actually happening in the body? With type 2 diabetes, the pancreas makes less insulin than what's necessary, or the body gradually becomes resistant to insulin itself. This means that most of the glucose we get from foods or from the liver remains in the blood. Then damage can be caused to the eyes, kidneys, nerves and blood vessels. Now, coating the pancreas are what is known as beta cells. These beta cells are covered in GLP-1 receptors which, when activated, cause the body to produce more insulin when needed, and suppress the liver's release of glucose by inhibiting the hormone glucagon. But these GLP-1 receptors also signal the body when we need to eat or when we feel full, a crucial linkage into the usage of Ozempic. Now, semaglutide aids the activation of these receptors. Once it enters the body, it will bind within the GLP-1 receptors, signaling the body to produce more insulin. In those with diabetes, their blood sugar can now be lowered, and they're at smaller risk of things like hypoglycemia. Yet also, it will make the patient feel full. Semaglutide improves the sensitivity of a molecule called leptin. This is the very hormone that regulates appetite in the brain. It binds to the OBRB receptor in the hypothalamus, which in turn will activate an anorexigenic neural circuit, essentially reducing one's appetite. Now, this is where it gets even more interesting. With this reduced appetite, someone will eat less. That's not science, the need to eat is simply suppressed. If you eat less, you'll consume fewer calories, less will be used and stored. It will essentially put the user in a calorie deficit, aiding the removal of unwanted weight. But such a reason is perhaps the very cause stocks are depleting from the shelves at a rapid pace, and some people with diabetes can no longer access or afford it. So, is it actually working? The looming disadvantage of people taking Ozempic who don't need to is, as said, preventing people from accessing it who do need to. People are taking it for recreational use, and it's why there are noticeable shortages globally. The EMA has stated that the increased demand has led to shortages that will continue through the entirety of 2024, making the rest of the year harder for diabetics. But the EMA have also said something else equally interesting. They've come out and said any other use of Ozempic and semaglutide may endanger the health of those who do end up taking it. But is this actually true? Studies have shown that Ozempic can cause some quite nasty problems when taking it with the sole purpose of losing weight. The pancreas may become inflamed, causing pancreatitis. In fact, it's hypothesized that the GLP-1 receptors, when stimulated by drugs such as semaglutide, may lead to the production of too much insulin in those without diabetes, a common predecessor of developing pancreatitis. Now, whilst this has been hypothesized, several studies have found that this is not actually the case. Take this study for instance. Over 56,000 patients were given GLP-1 receptor agonists and the effects were studied. The final results showed that there was almost no significant difference between the drugs and the placebo. Perhaps this is because the release of insulin is so much more gradual with semaglutide than the previous drugs taken before with diabetes. But there are other conditions people taking Ozempic need to be careful for, or so it's reported. Scientists have found quite scary links between semaglutide injections and the development of thyroid cancer. Now, it's important to consider that in these trials, no humans were in fact used. All of the subjects were mice and rats. So yes, it appears true that Ozempic can cause thyroid cancer, but this has not been found in humans. Yet unfortunately, it doesn't end so simply. French researchers did in fact examine diabetics who had taken other treatments involving activating the GLP-1 receptors. And these patients had a much greater chance of developing thyroid cancer and medullary thyroid cancer, particularly after 1 to 3 years of treatment. Still, Ozempic though was not the GLP-1 agonist used. What's more though is that Ozempic has also been found to potentially cause paralysis in the stomach, with even the Real Housewives star Jennifer Fessler being hospitalised for this last year. Or so I'm told. In fact, recently several lawsuits have been put Novo Nordisk's way for people falling really poorly after taking Ozempic, getting things such as paralysis and severe diarrhea. And they cite the brand's failure to warn about the consequences of taking Ozempic. But the treatment itself states that it should be done with medical supervision, and they're doing it recreationally. So personally, I don't think this will go very far. Yet we even have the case of Trish Webster, the Australian woman that died after taking Ozempic, trying to lose weight. In fact, over 3,000 Americans overdosed on semaglutide in 2023 alone. So, just like with everything else, Ozempic is clearly a risk to take, which social media never actually really talks about. But does this risk outweigh the reward? Because there's actually a lot Ozempic seems to do right. Take a look at this Reddit post. It's full of positive experiences with Ozempic. I'll leave a link below for those interested. Some of the stuff here just seems too good to be true, and there's even claims it can help addiction and dementia. Now, I will admit, I was skeptical myself at first, but I ran it through Scholar and this is what I found. Here's a study that did 3 trials involving over 15,000 patients with diabetes. Some took a placebo and some took a GLP-1 agonist, much like Ozempic is. They managed to find that the development of dementia was significantly reduced in those that took the Ozempic-like drugs compared to those who didn't. This is because it can improve nerve cells, inflammation and vascular health, which may slow the clinical progression of diseases like Alzheimer's. Other studies have found that as well as losing their appetite, people with addictions are also losing their cravings for the substances they're addicted to. Some are quitting and going cold turkey, entering sobriety once they take Ozempic, having no desire for further consumption. So not only are people having benefits from Ozempic in that it helps them lose weight, it seems as it has many more properties to give. Here is what user_the_real_gun on Reddit said about Ozempic. Anecdotally, I can say that it's been life-changing for me. I hope the logistics are resolved because it's likely already added years to my life. I know a lot of people think that weight management is purely about decision making, but it's hard to make good decisions when you feel like if you don't eat right now, you're going to die. The past few years, my weight had continued slowly creeping up. I tried all the typical weight loss methods, and they all ultimately left me feeling so hungry I would eventually get to a point that needing to eat felt like an emergency. 6 weeks on semaglutide and I'm down almost 30 pounds. I can make better decisions about what and how much I eat. It's the closest thing to a miracle drug I've ever experienced. Also, it's going to help me back off other medications. If I continue this trend, I'll likely be able to stop taking statins, Prilosec and Pepcid. So maybe Ozempic is a true miracle drug that we should treasure forever. Maybe the following years will uncover some nasty side effects of it. Maybe even more people will die. And just maybe we will be able to restock the global supply so those who do definitely need it can have their lives eased. But what are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. And if you don't, well, you'll have to watch The Real Housewives. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate every single one of you. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed. It's free and it really helps me out. See you next time.